Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Week 15 Rotoworld Waiver Wire Chat. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined by waivers guru Kyle Dvorchak. Only 17 more weeks to go in the NFL season, Kyle. No, we're through the fantasy regular season, unbelievably. We're now to the fantasy playoffs. The stakes, by definition, if you were here, have never been higher. You're trying to win a championship. Maybe you're in a points-only league, trying to go through the tape. Maybe you're even going through Week 18. We're going to try to help you. Kyle, it's weird waivers. There's been nothing other than weird waiver weeks this year. It's another weird waiver week where the top ad could yet again be a San Francisco 49ers running back. I don't even know if that's what you're going to say. We just don't actually know. It's a short week. They're trying to put on a brave face for Isaac. I can't say. How do you say his last name?
I say Garendo. I say it as close to as it looks.
Yeah, Garendo. We don't know what's going on with the 49ers, so I don't know what's going on with your top waiver wire out of the week. Who is your waiver wire out of the week, Kyle?
I'm the words I'm saying are a filibuster as I really pin down on, do we want to go with what I think is probably a 1 week start from Patrick Taylor? Like you said, quick turnaround for a foot injury for Garendo. Their comments immediately today were like, who knows? Well, he's going to give it a shot. Good luck, buddy.
Shanny's always so transparent with the injury information. So
he's so transparent when it's like a certain level of bad. If they're going to miss one game, you can tell right away. If they're going to miss the season, you will never know.
No.
Like, he sounds pessimistic today, but on the other hand, it's a one start for Patrick Taylor, and then I assume Garendo comes back, and he's the one they want to evaluate and look towards the future. Or do I go with the sincere McCormick? I think he has just played himself into a starting role for the rest of the season on a team that sucks. And despite saying that, I think I'm going to go McCormick.
Yeah, it just feels like McCormick too, where you want a guy who doesn't have variables. And I guess McCormick maybe has a variable in Alexander Madison.
Maybe,
returning 6 straight limited practices for Alexander Madison without playing. So they're really giving him all the time he needs to heal. And the Raiders know what they have in Alexander Madison. The whole league knows what they have in Alexander Madison. McCormick too, it's probably going to be Desmond Ridder this week. We don't know for sure. That could be bad. McCormick has a lot fewer variables, potentially longer shelf life than Patrick Taylor. Some other guys, by the way, real quick, rostered in fewer than 50% of Yahoo leagues. I mean, Tank Bigsby is still out
like a cheat. I even listed him lower on the list because he's rostered on 40-something% of leagues. If he's out there, I kind of feel like if you're listening to the show, you're a little bit of a sicko. Your leagues are a little more intense. I don't think Bigsby's out there. If Bigsby is, I actually think he's the best bet because he took over the backfield last week with, I think, something like 18 carries. Travis Etienne was just the passing down back, and it's another bad offense. I get it, but Bigsby has been elite this year. Now he's getting all the early down work, and you talk about the variables, like, he's really good. McCormick has played well. He's also a UDFA who's in his fourth season. I'm not sure there's much untapped ceiling. It's just there's more juice there than Madison. There is real juice there with Bigsby. It felt like cheating to say him, which is why I didn't.
So if you do have Tank too, so he's played well. He's someone they want to continue to evaluate. He's someone where the big bugaboo was always game script. You should look at the Jaguars' final 4 games. They have the easiest schedule in the NFL.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So Tank is hopefully got to schedule his own size, so to speak. So Tank Bigsby, I wrote in my article, he's probably someone who's been at the end of your bench for a really long time. Now you can look at him with the playoffs starting, really glad I kept you around, brother.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tank, take us to the promised land. Patrick Mel, thoughts on someone in your league purposely tanking this week's matchup because their playoff spot is locked and they would like to face a specific opponent in the playoffs, fair or foul? I'd say any kind of manipulation is always foul, Kyle. What do you say, though? I know it sounds silly. It's fantasy football, but there really is an integrity of the game. And I'd say any manipulation is foul, but what are your opinions on this?
I think it has to be blatant manipulation of your roster. You have to start starting players, but you can't start Dante Pettis or whatever. He's going to be active, technically, mostly playing special teams for the Saints. I guess he'll get some offensive run. So you have to start a viable roster. Now, as a manager, I'm going to flirt a little bit with playing some worse players. But I think as a commissioner, you can understandably enforce, you have to start what is reasonably considered your best roster.
Yeah, you have to start that's always what I do. And it comes up in our dynasty league occasionally. And I do I get someone complains hey, so-and-so is clearly tanking. Mm-hmm. Then I have to text, I have to text Nick Minzio. Nick Minzio, dude, you got to set a real lineup, right? And then he's like, okay. and then he does. So
he's like, what? Justin Fields get some snaps, man. I should be able to
play. Also, Pat wanting to know, Olave is not coming back. Are we riding the Juwan Johnson train the next 3 weeks? Or Kyle, bye weeks over, the Saints offense is just such a wasteland. Even if Juwan Johnson is sort of approaching the number one option, I'd say it's a real stretch he'll ever crack the top 12. It's still kind of struggling to crack the top 18. Do you have a counter opinion on that take?
He's up pushing for a 20% target share over the past 2 weeks. He is easily their best pass catcher outside of Alvin Kamara. With that being said, I liked him as a waiver wire ad in that tight end 15, 16, 17 range. I feel a little better about him than you do, but I agree. He's not a top 12 guy. I'm desperate guy, and I think he's one of the better I'm desperate guys, but that's all.
Will has several quarterbacks. He wants to add Ken Walker, who was dropped probably in a panic by somebody. He has Nix and Herbert. He also has Jordan Love. Basically wondering who should he drop for Ken Walker. Tank Dell is like not a must hold, but this is clearly a situation where you need to be dropping a quarterback. Even though it's kind of nice to have a lot of matchup options for the playoffs, Kyle, I think I would definitely be dropping a quarterback. My gut, without looking at the schedule, is Justin Herbert, just because of how banged up the Chargers offense is. But what is your take?
I mean, Herbert himself, a little banged up as well. I mean, he's been a little banged up or a lot of banged up at a lot of various points this year. I feel like I could actually go for Jordan Love. Like they just do not want to score points with their passing game. They actually love scoring points with their running back, which wish I would have known that before the year, if I'm being honest.
Yep. I actually do have a lot of Josh Jacobs because all the best ball bros would just have rather been dead than drafting him. So I just kept drafting him in every league and not really loving it. But what? He was in like
it's good.
He was in like the fourth round or something, I think.
I was going to say he was in the third, but either way, it's worked out well for you. It hasn't been the smoothest ride, but obviously it's worked out well for you. I would say, I guess maybe the only other caveat here is I actually took this as a super flex question because buys are over, so you only have to hold 2. So maybe that changes the calculus a little bit.
Well, I would say the time of year, this is actually a time of year where it's not the worst idea to hoard quarterbacks because it's the most competitive managers remaining. Any edge makes a difference. It's like, whereas in like week 8 or 9, you might be like, whatever, I've got 2 QBs I've been playing matchups with. I kind of like this matchup better on the wire, but I don't have like an extra bench spot for this. Like, it is a little bit more of a weapon maybe to have several matchups like that you don't have to add every week, but I still feel like you should just go with 2 quarterbacks. PBD OTC was wondering if Zach Charbonnet is going to be a first rounder in 2025 redraft. Why is the answer no, Kyle?
Well, Ken Walker at least has 1 more year on his deal. Yeah, I think he has exactly 1 more year on his deal. And look, as someone who drafted a ton of Charbonnet,
he's not good.
I was about to ask
no, they actually might. We'll see. You continue.
As someone who drafted a lot of Charbonnet, I thought he was a great pick, and I feel like I've been proven right. A bunch of good, or like 3, but for his price, 3 really good spot starts in terms of fantasy points. Frankly, though, like 1 good spot start this past one, which was incredible. But that was his first, I think it was like his first, second, and third explosive run, 15 plus yards of the entire year. He easily had the most carries without a long run heading into last week. And as much as it was fun, I started him in a bunch of high leverage spots, and it was fun to see him break off those runs. That's not who he's been all year, and that's just not who he is as a player. I don't think he's a guy who we can look at last week and say, like, that's something to build on in terms of, like, he could be a different player. He's a snap-eating, run-of-the-mill jag. And when you give that guy all the snaps and a bunch of targets and a bunch of carries, he legitimately can be an RB1, but teams probably don't want to give that guy a bunch of carries when Ken Walker is the more explosive guy. This could force a committee going forward, which would be frustrating for both, but I still don't really buy that Charbonnet would ever just take over.
No, I don't. It's just too complex of a situation, or absent major injury, neither of them will be in the first or probably honestly even second round next year.
Definitely
And it was a concern for Ken Walker that this happened because maybe Ken's has been banged up all year. He's the classic violent runner. He has not been explosive or effective, especially in the second half of the season. Or I do think something's probably going, clearly something. He missed a game with 2 injuries. I think he was probably injured well before that. And I feel like he might already be in like the accumulation stage of his career. As one of those guys who took too many early hits. Who knows if he'll really get it back? That does happen with running backs somewhat frequently, though. Actually, Josh Jacobs has come back from the dead once or twice. But what would be the Seahawks incentive to ditch like this 2-back approach, basically? And like if they stick with the 1-back approach, Would they really just make a Charbonnet and then like turn like Kenneth Walker into the pure breather change up guy? There's just too much that needs to happen. Charbonnet had a lot of like decent fantasy spot starts last year, but he was kind of like Alexander Madison, where they were not just great starts.
They were a grind to watch. As someone who needed him in those spots, and I ended up blurbing at least one or two of those games where you needed him to get to 22 touches to get home. Like, he's not a guy who like game script went against him, he got 12 touches, but he still got there. He's just not that guy. Yeah,
but yesterday was his first like certifiably great spot start, and the best game by any Seahawks running back all year. So just keep monitoring the situation. PPD. He has one more question real quick. Mark Andrews at the Giants. Or Pat Freiermuth at Philadelphia. I mean, Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
No offense.
Like even his like, I call it stupid because I love Mark Andrews. His stupid role where he doesn't get all of the routes. He's not this extreme target earner anymore. He's playing for what is Actually, he's probably not playing for the MVP quarterback anymore. He's almost certainly not. But he's playing for what I guess will probably be the runner-up MVP quarterback on a team that has to pass the football pretty much every game because they suck on defense. Or Pat Freiermuth is kind of the opposite.
He's getting so many of the money targets too. Where the role is not as high volume as we were expecting, but the targets he is getting, they are paying the bills. Mostly in, like, of course, the tight end 10 to 15 range. But Pat Freiermuth, I mean, he barely has a floor. He hasn't had a ceiling at all. It's just been kind of a lost year for Pat Freiermuth. FMP, he dropped Will Dissly, picked up Jake Ferguson seconds before kickoff yesterday because he thought he had more upside rest of season. I thought maybe this would mean either or. Any other tight ends we're targeting for the fantasy playoffs? The only guy who really comes to mind, Kyle, would be Juwan Johnson. But I mean, I'm not like targeting Juwan Johnson.
That's how I felt too.
Grant Calcaterra, maybe.
I mean, he's in that same vein. Yeah, exactly. He's starting. Like, if you really are bad, I mean, Dissly is the perfect example. Obviously, this person was fortunate enough to drop Dissly. He's banged up right now, I believe. If he doesn't come back and you were relying on him because he was a pretty good spot starter adjacent, yeah, it's Calcaterra, it's Juwan. I mean, you should check your league for Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz. Those guys are the tight end 10 and 11. And just
what about Noah Gray?
Yeah, I had him in the waiver wire article. It doesn't feel like a huge target, though, because he's had 4 catches and I believe 4 games in a row. Exactly 4. No more. And there's really not a path for him to get more. He's still running 55% of the routes. That's, it's backup plus territory. They trust him. And I mean, they really do trust him near the end zone. Patrick Mahomes is a guy who like springs these guys loose all the time. But just on the volume alone, it's another, if you need to make the spot start, go for it. But I don't think this is a great week to really stash tight ends as like this guy could break out.
No, it's absolutely one truly sicko name to throw out there. I mean, what about Tyler Higbee, who appears to be coming back from reserve this week?
He's not going to see a single target. He's going to be the team's Mike Gesicki.
He always sees targets, but he always sees like 4 of them, and he never does anything with them.
Yeah.
He actually does always see targets. I've never understood their obsession with Tyler Higbee.
They drafted him in fantasy the one year he scored like 30 points back weeks in like 2020.
Kyle, we have someone, Diego, he's here almost every week. But he's comparing Kyler Murray to Blake Bortles. Is this fair or foul, basically? And just Blake Bortles. So there's not a question here in Diego's comment. I will give you a question. Without looking at the schedule, how do you feel about Kyler Murray being your fantasy playoff starting fantasy quarterback? Is this where you can be like riding solo, or is this a situation where you either need a second quarterback on your roster or you need to be playing matchups with Kyler in the waiver wire?
I still think Kyler's going to project for more points than anything you can get on the wire, but that's because at this point, the wire is so picked over. Like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield were pickups early in the year. Like those are guys that, I mean, Sam Darnold just broke the slate last week. I guess he secondhand broke the slate last week because of Josh Allen, and Baker Mayfield's like the QB6 right now. And those guys were pickups, but it's not a position like running back where you can just turn on a dime. And this guy who was hardly rosterable is now Zach Charbonnet, a top, he's like the RB1 last week. He's probably an RB1 overall when Ken Walker's out. Quarterback just isn't a position like that. Your options are going to be Drake May. I will say, like, Jameis Winston plays the Bengals.
They could be Jameis. There could
not
be.
Not next week. He gets the Chiefs this week, which he does fine against good defenses, so I'm not concerned. But I'd prefer to play who is ultimately not that good of a quarterback, just a fun quarterback in a good matchup. In 2 weeks, you should rank Jameis ahead of Kyler because he gets the Bengals. That's going to be a fun game. You should legitimately start him over Kyler that week. This week, it's either way.
Yeah, looking at the wire, there are not this you're going to have to basically be riding with Kyler Murray. And maybe someone dropped Anthony Richardson, but then you're looking at the even lower floor version of Kyler, basically. So, yeah, you're mostly riding with Kyler. And, here's Matthew Berry's ride or die. You're riding with Kyler and hoping you do not die. I've ridden with Kyler so many times. I've died a lot. I've died a lot over the years with poor Kyler. Please, Kyler, I have him in my main dynasty league. We need points. We need points down the stretch. Orchard, by the way, says he has zero tolerance when people aren't setting their. I'm pretty zero tolerance myself with the lineup stuff.
Oh man, I've got a good. Sorry to interrupt. I've got a good. I should be laying down the hammer right now in my dynasty league. We have like 2 or 3 commissioners, so no one actually has to like do too much work. And I text one of my friends. I'm like, hey, 1, you should be setting your lineup. It's just good behavior. But 2, I need you to win to get in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
I need a win, which I had already secured. I had the nuts this week, and I need you to win to get me my spot in the playoffs. Keon Coleman's in your lineup. Take him out. He is currently losing by 0.2 points.
Oh, man, I'll be honest with you. I did the same thing this week. I'm not going to name names, but I texted a few people like, listen, dog, I need the lineup set. All right.
Oh, yeah. And he missed my text, didn't take Keon Coleman out, and he needs 1 catch from Jake Ferguson tonight. And if he doesn't get that catch, there will be hell to be paid, man. I will be so mad.
It looks like my texts work, and I'm going to squeak into the playoffs. Although the Bucky Irving injury probably has ruined me.
Don't love
Speaking of Dynasty, Ben is wondering if Jonathan Brooks is a drop in Dynasty. Retore the same ACL that he entered the league with torn. I wrote in my article today, first-year injury, the career outcome is almost always bad. There are big exceptions. Travis Kelce got hurt. His rookie year training camp, missed the whole season. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But in general, it's a bad sign. Re-tearing the same knee is, of course, an awful sign. Jonathan Brooks was the 1-1 in a lot of dynasty leagues last year. So, I almost feel like this is a time where like the sunk cost fallacy might work for us. Like I basically cannot cut Jonathan Brooks. Yeah. Do you agree, Kyle?
Yeah. 1-1 of running backs, not overall.
He was in a lot of leagues. He was 1-1 overall. Like not
people
a lot.
Took Marv behind him.
Probably not. I guess you're right. Yeah, not Marv, but he was in the top 5 and basically.
Yeah, easily. He was a good pick in the top 5 too. And sometimes you run bad. I don't think you're dropping because in any dynasty league, like at a 15-man roster, who are you picking up in dynasty? And that no dynasty is 15-man, but setting it at some dumb low number of 15. Who has a better long-term outlook? There's not a player, let alone most dynasty leagues are 20, 25, 30.
But the 2 injuries, man, like seriously, who scores more fantasy points the next 2 years? Jonathan Brooks or Sincere McCormick? Like, it sounds insane.
I thought about it. It's Brooks because they honestly both have the same odds of like playing football next year. McCormick's a UDFA who I think came in the league in 2022, might have been 21, and has hardly played any football for 2 or 3 years. That's what Jonathan Brooks is going to look like, but with better draft capital and better talent.
Mr. Magic is a real quick Monday night question. I know this goes on podcast, but he's tied. He has Jamar, he has CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aubrey. All I'm going to say to Mr. Magic is he needs the Cowboys to get behind so they're not kicking field goals. Otherwise, you might be in real trouble. Well, we have another question here on Zach Charbonnet. The analytics bros are crying and coping with Sharps' bad advanced metrics and ignoring the Walker's missed tackles are due to his refusal to hit the hole. What say you, Kyle? I really can't decide if either of these guys are good, and that very much includes Kenneth Walker. And I just cannot. Who do you think is better, Kyle? Like, who would you rather have for the next 3 years in Dynasty League, Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker?
So I agree with Diego. Listen to the Thursday pod. I made a very similar point saying that Ken Walker is a very good tackle breaker. And in previous years, he's been very explosive. He has hit the home runs after breaking tackles. He is playing like a Dameon Pierce or a Najee Harris this year, where he still sheds tackles with ease, but he is not hitting that next gear. And I think that's kind of in the same vein of what Diego is saying is they're like empty efficiency metrics in terms of the tackle breaking, because no one gets points for tackle breaking. We get points for yards, we get points for touchdowns. And typically those two things do go together. Like breaking more tackles leads to more yards. But in this case, that's not what's happening. And it's been a consistent trend this year where he's not moving in mud like Najee Harris is, but his missed tackles force are not leading to nearly as much as you would expect. I do think the fact that he was a really good home run hitter leading into this year makes me think maybe next year he gets it back, where Charbonnet has never really had that next gear to his game. So I would still prefer Ken Walker in the long run in Dynasty, but I do think some of the advanced numbers in terms of like the PFF grade, the missed tackles forced, are missing a lot with Walker. I agree with that part of it.
I think Walker is probably just having like running backs occasionally have these kind of years where they suffer one too many injuries like too early in the season because running backs are always banged up. And Kenneth Walker maybe just started taking the wear and tear too early in the season, and it's just kind of a lost year for me. Lost is a bit strong. Darnell Mooney, thoughts? ? Mooney has more receiving yards than Drake London, Kyle.
Wait, what? Are you serious?
Not joking. Wish I were kidding. Not kidding.
Did London miss a game?
Maybe like one.
I know he was hurt at some point.
I don't know if he did miss a game. But
I don't think he missed it either. He was like banged up and played.
Are
you serious?
I'm double checking right now. Mooney, 873 yards. I mean, literally no way Drake London has. He has 866. So he has 7 more yards than Drake London. Drake London has 5 games this season where he's drawn at least 10 targets and not gotten to 100 yards. That's kind of more of a Kirk Cousins stat.
I was going to say, give us the damn Penix, brother.
So I know, seriously. Darnell Mooney, 142 yards, career high. He had been cooking, for several months running until Kirk struggles like the past 2 weeks, kind of like finally took him out where he had only 47 combined yards. But his season has been more yesterday than not. I mean, the bye weeks are over. Kirk is collapsing, but it's the Raiders, it's the Giants. Basically, Darnell Mooney, is he still an every week starter during the fantasy playoffs? Let's frame the question that way.
Yeah, I think so. And as a Darnell Mooney hater, I'd like to point out that it was a good matchup last week, like we talked about. As much as I kind of think that's just who he is, he's pretty matchup dependent in terms of like if the defense is going to force you, like the opposing offense is going to force you to throw, which we know is not a given with the Falcons. They don't actually want to throw the football a ton. And if the defense is giving up chunk plays, those two conditions are met. Mooney is actually a pretty good play. The opposing offenses the next few weeks don't seem like they're going to get much going, but they're bad defenses. They are good matchups in that sense. He probably still is a decent starter. I don't think a ton of rosters are going to need him, but if you have to throw him in your flex, I think it's fine.
It's fine. Lindsay's wondering, is Chris Olave worth a pickup? I don't think he's coming back this year, Kyle, right? I would not be rostering Chris
Feels
Olave.
like it hardly even matters with Jake Hayner as the quarterback too.
Or even Spencer Rattler.
Rattler.
It's just too messed up. Yeah. Unfortunately, Chris Olave, talk about a lost season. Diego thanks us for filling in his implied questions, by the way. So yeah, sometimes too, like we get what's more of a statement. I'm like, I think I know what they're trying to ask. And then
I vibe with the statement and I can roll that into a question.
Elia, he's a weekly viewer too. This is more of a statement too. He's saying James Conner's holding back the Cardinals offense, that Kyler needs a Kamara. I feel like the Cardinals, can never quite figure out what they want to do with James Conner because he goes several months without catching passes. Then they try to have him catch passes again. Then they involve Amari DiMercato on third downs. I don't really know what this question should be here, Kyle, but I mean, it's hard to say James Conner's a liability. It does seem like they want a true 3-down back and that they don't think James Conner's a true 3-down back, but they also just recently extended James Conner. So they're not getting their Alvin Kamara. James Conner, is he at every week top 20 running back for the fantasy playoffs? He's someone where every week when I'm doing the rankings, listen, I know that James Conner is supposedly the RB16, but he really just feels a lot more like the RB23 to me. Are you having fun relying on James Conner, or is he someone you'd really, if you say you had amazing depth, you secretly wish you could bench during the fantasy playoffs?
I mean, I do kind of wish I could bench him, but the touches are what they are. Last week, 22 touches. The week before that, 20. Down game, 12 before that, although 5 catches. That's the thing, is he's hitting another phase of they're using him again as a pretty reliable pass catcher. Week before that, 17, 21, 22, 21, almost at or above 20 every game for the past 6 weeks. You can't bench that guy in terms of those touches. And a lot of those have come through the air. Do I think James Conner should be a team's number 2 pass catcher? Who's to say? Seems bad when you spend a lot of draft capital on Marvin Harrison Jr., but they don't care. They're throwing to him a lot, and as long as you play in half PPR or PPR, that is quite good.
We're all looking for the Kyler who did this. Mark is wondering, are we starting Week 15, Bo Nix or Jared Goff? It is Bo Nix against the Colts, Kyle. It is Jared Goff in what we hope is a massive shootout with the Buffalo Bills. Answer the question. I'm going to drop off camera really quick, but who are we streaming? Bo Nix or Jared Goff this week, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how many quarterbacks every week I'm even starting over Jared Goff. And for me, it is quite literally as simple as go to the implied team totals page, sort by highest, and you've got Jared Goff at the top basically every week. I don't know if they were at the top last week because the Eagles had such a good matchup, but they're going to project to score the most points every single week from here to the end of the season because they're easily the best offense, and it's not even much of a race. And even when they blow out their opponents, you're typically getting multiple touchdowns from Jared Goff because when they blow out their opponents, one, they are playing to the whistle at least for 55 minutes. They do get to pull their starters every now and then.
The Lions love to Belichick people and try to score as many points as possible.
So, like, you could cede 3 touchdowns to the running backs and be like, dude, I still got 250 yards and 3 touchdowns from Goff too. So I'm rolling with Goff over Nix, who's a good play, but Goff, I think, is a top, 7 or 8 weekly quarterback, and Nix is more of a top 12.
Yeah, this Goff, it's very unfortunate. Like, Jared Goff is the classic, you look for reasons to bench Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. You cannot bench Jared Goff against the Bill. I mean, this game I haven't seen what it is yet. This game might have the highest total of the entire year, would be my initial guess.
Ooh, I like that.
Between the lines and 53.5. It probably won't be.
Do you have it pulled up? It's 53.5?
No, I honestly think it's going to be something really high.
Oh, no, I'm going to go with 50.5.
Dude, it's 54.5.
Oh, right. Hell yeah.
I think it actually is the highest of the year.
Oh, that's got to be the highest of the year. Yeah. I swear to God, every week we are scrounging for a 49.5.
I think 52.5 had been the highest total of the year.
It checks out for sure.
Yeah, 54.5. That actually does ring true to me. FMP, he wants to rank these tight ends rest of the season. Jake Ferguson, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry. No one wants to actually be playing these guys, but we have to. Can you rank them?
Ertz, Henry, Ferguson. I think Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback than Drake May. And I don't know exactly what we're going to see from Ferguson. I would not be surprised if he doesn't have a full-time role for the next week or two, because Luke Schoonmaker is fine, and he can probably be a 1B committee tight end. I still think Ferguson's better, but if you're telling me a committee tight end on a Cooper Rush offense, that's just a no-go. So I'll take Ertz then Henry.
Yeah, I think he has left the door too ajar for the backup Schoonmaker to get targeted. So Jesse is wondering if Breece Hall will be back next week. Should he flex Braylon Allen? Christian Watson, Rome Odunze. Let's say Breece Hall is not back. Are we flexing Breece Allen? Christian? We're probably still going with Braylon Allen. Despite the really disappointing Week 14. You can't really. I could understand wanting to bench Braylon Allen, but you can't bench those touches, even if he's splitting them for Christian Watson or Rome Odunze. Do you agree, Kyle?
Yeah, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. You're still getting a decent amount of touches versus 2 guys that are true secondary pass catchers on teams that the Packers are good when they throw the football. They just choose to not do it very often. And obviously the Bears are a much different conversation where they're typically forced to throw the football more. They're not that great at it right now. So if these players were more involved in their offenses in various ways, I think there'd be a much closer conversation. But I do kind of agree. Just bank the young running back touches with Braylon Allen.
We've got a lot of good questions to get to. Stay patient, and we have not gotten to yet. We're going to try to establish the Kyler Murray line real quick. Are we going to start Sam Darnold over Kyler Murray rest of the season, Kyle?
I think so.
I do think so too, because he's basically doing what you hope for from Kyler, with the one difference being there's the theoretical increased running ceiling with Kyler, but Sam Darnold's passing floor is considerably higher at this point. He's spiking way more weeks, whereas his relative lack of rushing threat just isn't mattering compared to Kyler. And that's not to say there won't be weeks where Kyler maybe doesn't outpoint him.
I've got bad news. Patriots matchup, very good. Panthers matchup, the nuts. Rams matchup, very good for Kyler.
It's Kyler though.
I know.
He's to the point where he's a good matchup for the defenses, is what I always like to tell people. Yeah. So we'll see.
Those are good matchups, though, buddy.
Vincent, I would just keep both them rostered, just to be honest. T at Tennessee this week, Jerry Jeudy against the Kansas City Chiefs. This will be kind of a tough one in the rankings. Kyle, what's your initial lean on this?
T, he sees more targets than Jamar Chase every week.
But Jerry Jeudy, and yet Jerry Jeudy leads the NFL in receiving since his quarterback took over. I'm actually not sure if that still holds after Week 15. But we're going to find out very powerfully on Tuesday when I start doing the rankings. Who is doing that? And Michael Caldwell says, and yet Drake London is ranked as a wide receiver 1 every week. Not here, brother.
Yeah,
not for a few weeks. Actually, it's because the volume is certifiably wide receiver 1. And at first, when this Kirk Cousins funk started, It wasn't clear. It was like decline or just like normal Kirk Cousins.
Normal Kirk Cousins sucks for a week.
Yeah, because like even sometimes Kirk Cousins even sucks sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We're now going over a month, and it's becoming a much larger problem. Chew something weird name. Where do you rank Patrick Taylor if no Isaac Garundo this week, Kyle? All 30 teams playing bye weeks mercifully over. Intellectually, where do you view Patrick Taylor in a vacuum?
Intellectually, chewed pen is what the thing is.
It's true day pen per minute, but it's chewed pen. Sorry, I used to chew a lot of pens growing up. By the way,
I understood it right away. The thing at the bottom, where you're like, oh, that's so tasty. Love it. So I think I'm just gonna say the same thing I said with Garundo last week. This guy's getting all the touches, and he plays for the 49ers. Rank him as like a fringe RB1.
Patrick Taylor is a fringe RB1.
Like, are they going to give it to Izzy Abanikanda? He's been with the team for 8
probably.
days.
Actually, yes, probably. I think this will be the first time we get something of a committee, to be honest, if Garundo can't go.
I don't know. I feel like 8 days of Izzy Abanikanda is not enough for Shanahan to trust Izzy Abanikanda.
There's just going to be too many guys. Like, here's going to be the RB1-2 borderline, like really spitballing, but, David Montgomery is always there. Alvin Kamara is always there. Or not always there. He's going to be there now with the Saints situation. James Cook, Brian Robinson Jr.,
Taylor over Robinson Jr.,
Charbonnet, Aaron Jones, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, James Conner. It's pretty stiff competition.
You could rank him at the top of that group, and I wouldn't mind, outside of like the first name or two you mentioned. You could also rank him in the back, though, and that'd be fine, too, as a measure of like risk tolerance. But
here's a good old spicy meatball. Jaden Reed. I mean, the rug pulls have just gotten totally absurd with Jaden Reed. Thankfully, I've always been under-ranking every week, thank God. I haven't fallen like into the Jaden Reed trap. But it's not like I was ranking him in like you don't start Jaden Reed territory. Isn't it to the point where we can no longer even start Jaden Reed, Kyle?
Yeah, there is no rug to be pulled. Like you've done this to yourself if that's the
case. Has rolled it up and put it in the moving van 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So wait, hold on. Yeah. So is he just not in your lineup this week?
No.
You really don't think so?
No, he doesn't get targets anymore.
But it could work for us.
Look, we need to go back and find out what happened, and I think it was weeks 1 and 4 when he had like 230 balls. Greatest 2 games of my life. And I think ever since then, it might be partially due to Jordan Love's health or lack thereof, where if you are able to protect your quarterback and win football games, I understand that you should probably just do that. And I do think a lot of what they've done in terms of their extremely run-heavy approach is an effort to protect Jordan Love, who has had so many different small and large injuries this year, and it has worked. They've been successful in their efforts. So even if I still I won't give up the ghost on Jaden Reed being good, but good players earn targets. So that's very much going against him. And even if he is good, he's not earning targets, so it doesn't matter. It's a moot point.
Yeah, we haven't been getting too far ahead of ourselves here. Besides Ashton Genty, or however you pronounce his name, Kyle, any good running backs that you already have your eye on in the 2025 draft class, or are you just not prepared to answer this one yet?
No, I'm a little prepared. I really like the Iowa running back Caleb Johnson. He kind of reminds me of Ken Walker, but good Ken Walker, fun Ken Walker in his rookie year, where this guy gets 15 carries and he's 7,000 in DFS and he's 40% owned. No way the fish hit another home run, and he hit his second one already. That's kind of what he reminds me of, is just like disproportionately hitting home runs for a dude who's not like the small scat back home run hitter. So obviously GNT's great. Ohio State's going to send, I assume, 2 good running backs out. I assume they both leave, obviously.
I don't even know who the Ohio State running backs are. I need to look very powerfly into this.
He's like a 5-star who came from Ole Miss, and Travion Henderson, who I think we gave a sick amount of NIL money to come back. And why we had Judkins, I don't know.
Super Shack has stashed Josh Downs. He has a bye week this week. Will Josh Downs be a viable starter by week 16, the fantasy semifinals? I mean, listen, he's going to be in the top 36. I can say that, but is Josh Downs someone you can really be relying on, Kyle, with everything on the line during the fantasy playoffs?
I mean, we might get rug pulled at some point again, but with that being said, I think one thing I'm going to hang my hat on with his previous lack of fit with Anthony Richardson, Richardson.
And Mr. Kyle is briefly frozen. I think he'll be right back. Kyle? All right. Sorry. What were you saying, Kyle? We're sorry about that for the interruption. Finish up your Josh Downs thought, though.
Richardson, relatively infamous for not being able to hit anything 5 yards or closer and really good at throwing deep. And that was never a good fit with Josh Downs. But over the past 2 or 3 Richardson starts, they have really made it a point to push the ball downfield with downs specifically. And he's just good enough in every facet of the game, like yards after the catch, winning downfield, hand fighting. Was it you that said like it's a wee bit of Antonio Brown to his game? Like that plays much bigger than his size type of stuff, where these corners who have 2 or 3 inches and 15 pounds on him, he can just technically win hand fights in a way that lets him win in all areas of the field. I'm going to hang my hat on that and say that that's how you make Josh Downs work with Richardson, and that's what they are trying to do.
There really are some Antonio Brown vibes to Josh Downs' game, which is why I hope, we just don't get like the first 3 years of his career just being kind of a wash. It would be very, very unfortunate. We need some good quarterback play for Josh Downs. Ronald, who do you like better rest of season, Russell Wilson or Anthony Richardson? Is a pretty tough one. It's the classic Russ has the floor, sort of. Anthony Richardson has the ceiling, sort of. Yeah. I think it's you roster both and play matchups. But that, listen, if you're like trying to survive in your fantasy playoffs, I mean, there's no doubt you're banking more points with Russell Wilson. It's just, I don't know if Russell Wilson can really win you a matchup. I guess Richardson can win you a matchup if he scores 2 rushing touchdowns, Kyle. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'll just say, if I have to pick one and only one, I'll go with Ant because of how much more they put on his plate as a runner. That was, I think, the biggest issue from a fantasy perspective and a little bit from a real life perspective too, that he's one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks to come out of college in the past decade or whatever. And they were really trying to develop him as just a pure pocket passer. And they're now designing carries for him pretty consistently in like back-to-back weeks. And that's a good fantasy floor. That will really help paper over the games where he completes 10 passes. It
has shored everything up for Anthony and made the ceiling attainable too. I will say if you're in like this bank points mode where like quarterback's not even like that. I mean, every position is important during the fantasy playoffs, but like if quarterback is more just like the whole purpose of it for your team is like not to screw you, Russell Wilson probably is the better play. But I do agree that Ant is not as volatile as he seems since coming back from the benching because the rushing has just increased so much. Timothy Chan is wondering if we're benching Jaden Daniels in week 16 during the Eagles. Why is the answer no, Kyle?
No, he's good. Who cares? Like, it's fine. Just play.
I mean, and just too, like, the Eagles defense has been for real, but I mean, you can see how far a narrative gets you. Like, Bryce Young is like making big time throws against the Eagles.
Bryce Young was one Xavier Legette drop from winning that game.
And Jaden Daniels, to give you a little more actual reasoning, it looked like the governor was finally off in week 13. Like, he was finally over the rib injury. Well-timed bye to help him get even healthier. Mm-hmm. It seems like he is ready to finally nuke again during the fantasy playoffs when we need him most. Can we trust Bucky Irving if he plays this week, Kyle, or is a risk of just being like the same story as last week where he plays, his back gets tight immediately? How are we feeling about getting Bucky Irving in fantasy quarterfinal matchups?
I mean, if he plays, I'm going to play him. I do think we should project a committee, whereas 2 weeks ago, it looked like he had just about iced Rachaad White. I don't think we can project that anymore. It would be, sort of reckless for them to play it that way and for us to project it that way. But even if we just go back to 12 to 15 Bucky Irving touches, he's so good on a per touch basis that I am fine rolling that with that guy.
I need Bucky so bad. Like
we have a lot of the same players in our like stupid home dynasty leagues because I have Devonta, you have Devonta, I have Bucky, and I think we have like 1 or 2 other guys.
You're like worse than you could ever imagine. Do I need Bucky Irving this week? So I'm hoping he's just be on the training table literally 24 hours a day. And this be when you're not on the training table, be stretching, young man. And we need you so bad. Ben, by the way, this is not Kyler led my team straight into the consolation bracket. Yeah, a lot of that going around. Joseph Garcia, he's here every single week. If Ced Tillman and Romeo Dobbs are out again, can Jalen McMillan or Joshua Palmer be thrust into the lineup? I'm assuming he's going to have to start one of these guys, it sounds like. If they're out, who would you rather go with? Jalen McMillan, who may be establishing some ceiling, Josh Palmer, who has sort of established a floor?
Oh, who do I go with? I'll go with conditional and Ladd McConkey doesn't play Josh Palmer. If he does play, easily Jalen McMillan. Like Palmer goes from he goes from basically third in the pecking order for targets just among the wide receivers to first when McConkey's out. Like you have a relatively stationary role for Quentin Johnston, and then they turn to someone else as their wide receiver 1, and that guy is Palmer. But when McConkey is there, he just does not exist hardly. So I would say if you're saying Dobbs is probably going to play. Like he was limited in practice throughout the week. They had a short week, so it was a little harder to get him back on the field. I would say if you just want to take the upside bet, go with Palmer in that if McConkey misses, he's a really fun play. If McConkey plays, I'm pretty sure you're going to have Dobbs available to you.
I will say non-PPR actually is a factor here. Like Jalen McMillan is like kind of dinged. He's the kind of guy who's dinged in PPR, less so. I mean,
he's dinged in all formats. He's had a
Josh Palmer is also like kind of a product of PPR, so I think it does help in PPR for Mr. Jalen. Elia wanting us to rank the defense. We don't know the matchups at the top of our head, but just from your gut, Kyle, which defense would you rather be rolling with during the fantasy playoffs? Packers, 49ers, the Broncos. My gut is the Broncos.
That was mine too.
Just the best defense, the least injured right now. Well, compared to San Francisco, I don't think the Packers defense. Well, the Packers defense is banged up. Actually, I don't know if Jair Alexander's.
He hasn't played football in like 4 years, so
yeah. It seems like the Broncos. To the Broncos, well-timed bye. They should be pretty healthy. They've had a lot of big fantasy matchup performances this year too.
Broncos schedule is not great. They get Colts, which is good. I would play them in that. And then I believe they get like Chiefs, Chargers or something like that. Don't love that. So if you want to go to the next question, I can look up these two teams real quick. I think the Packers though end at oh no, they just played the Lions. So maybe they've avoided that. That would be good. You like to see that.
I think the Packers schedule is not good.
Dude, none of these. Get some better schedules out here with these because the 49ers get Rams, Dolphins, and Lions. You can't. That's no.
Well, the Packers have the Seahawks. Then they do have the Saints in week 16, but then they have the Vikings.
No, those are all it's Packers easily. Like Sam Darnold's playing great. We were just complaining about how awful he's played like 4 weeks ago. It's fine to play him. And then of course you get the Jake Haener matchup, which like you're making the championship at least.
That is true. Jake Haener will send you to the championship. All right. Well, hold on. First, I've come around on Ladd, by the way. He said, Kyle, if Ladd doesn't play next week, is Pat correct in calling him a bust? Part of my complaints about Ladd, of course, were that he like never could get through a full season at Georgia. And now we've seen really, really good NFL play put on film, but his best game came when he was already nursing a shoulder injury.
That's a feather in his cap for the injury situation.
Then he injures his knee mid-game. And I do to wonder if, especially the way they're using him, like if he's just, because they're using him as like an all over the field number one overall receiver. And I think it's very fair. I mean, the guy's already wearing a Guardian cap. Like it's very fair to question, like, is this guy like gonna hold up with this kind of usage? And I just do not know.
I agree that guy who's hurt a lot in college and gets hurt a lot in the NFL, there's a trend there. I don't know how much we can say that's going to hold, but if you're just asking me, who do I think plays more games per season of their career, I would take like Marvin Harrison over him. He's like physically built for this a little more than Ladd is. With that being said, in terms of just the Ladd conversation, rookie goes out and balls out, deal, done. He's a good pick. I don't care if he's hurt. Cool.
Elia telling you, by the way, to watch Arrested Development if you never have. Very much agree. All-time great show. Elisha wondering, we don't know the matchups. Week 16 and 17. Kyler, Tua, Brock Purdy, Jameis Winston. My gut says Tua, Brock, Kyler, Jameis. So you agree with that order?
I think I exactly agree with that order. Tua is my number one. Jameis, maybe you could flip Jameis and Brock, but we're about lockstep.
People don't want to play Tua because it's like brick stacking. He's not doing any big plays anymore.
Yeah.
But again, he's doing like this is like this fantasy gold mine. Like it really is the Peyton Manning approach where, listen, man, I'm attempting 48 passes. I'm going to complete 36 of them. Almost always that results in 320 yards. You hope that it results in 3 touchdowns. So yeah, that's just you don't, especially because the way he started the season. But I think you have to rely on Mr. Tua Tagovailoa there. Orchard, rank these 4 for the stretch run. Drake London, DK Metcalf, Brian Thomas Jr., Terry McLaurin. 4 pretty big names there. I think somewhat obvious order, but what's your answer, Kyle?
McLaurin, BTJ, London, Metcalf.
McLaurin is number 1 for sure. I mean, London is still seeing so many targets. Like he's seeing, like basically Brian Thomas took him a month to have a game finally that Drake London has every week, like 8 for 86. You know, that's like a somewhat typical Drake London game, more like 5 or 6 catches, I guess. But I think it's just more McLaurin in matchups. Is that like too cop out of an answer? McLaurin is
no, that's fine. That's fine.
McLaurin has separated from this group. I think is what we would say. Almost out of questions. If you've got them, please get them in. Kyle is freezing. Elias says he might send some Barstow Del Taco sauce packets. As I think that would be very good. I actually haven't had Del Taco since I was like 15. I'm assuming I would still like it. Send the sauce. Quentin, Jonathan Brooks equals J.K. Dobbins. The lure will last forever. The big difference was J.K. Dobbins actually did play like 10 games and average 6 yards per carry as a rookie. So it's kind of an imperfect comparison as Kyle freezes there. But Kyle, what do you think about that comparison, Jonathan Brooks to J.K. Dobbins? I'd say it's imperfect because J.K. Dobbins did actually manage to play as a rookie and contribute.
That's what I think would be the big difference is these guys who get some production early in their career. Like I wouldn't even say it was some. He had like a few good. It was the rookie season, then like a few good games sprinkled throughout the next year or two. That's probably already going to put him pretty far ahead after 2 years than Brooks will be. Like Brooks is going to have close to no production to his name 2 years through his career, and Dobbins was low production, but Brooks is going to be close to a 0. And I do think that's a meaningful difference that you pointed out.
All right, we're out of questions. We're having slight technical difficulties. We might as well just call it a minute or two early here. Any question you might have, though, will hopefully be answered on the website this week. My rankings with Kyle's start 'em, sit 'em later in the week with his 32 stats on Wednesday. His, of course, waiver wire column, which will be evergreen through Tuesday evening. Podcasting with Denny on Tuesday, podcasting with Kyle and Denny on Thursday. If we missed you today, we're sorry, but yeah, we're going to get it answered on the website sometime this week. So for Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back with you really soon.